How did Tom Scholz from the band Boston achieve his legendary guitar tone? It's often said that the band's guitarist and mastermind keeps his methods a closely guarded secret. But as we'll uncover in this video, that's not entirely true. With a lot of digging, which took me a few days of research, the clues are scattered throughout all the interviews that he's done, and they reveal much more than you would think.
Replicating that sound in my home studio, though, that's a different story.
What began as a quest to reverse engineer Tom's sound turned into a challenge I almost didn't take on. Until my stubborn side kicked in, I decided to try recreating his tone without using the same gear.
When you ask any guitarist where tone comes from, you'll have anything from tone is in the hands to gear doesn't matter, and a whole lot in between. Being both a guitarist and audio engineer, I can see both points and I agree with them to a certain extent. But it doesn't paint the whole picture.
Early on in this challenge, I thought my mission was quite simple: crack the code of Boston's guitar tone. But as I dug deeper, what I uncovered turned out to be far more valuable than simply replicating the Boston sound. I'll admit that when I first started to do the research for this video, I thought finding out which gear was used on the first album would be pretty easy. Just Google it and bam, everything you need to know will be right there. But of course, that wasn't the case.
Now, Tom Scholz has done plenty of interviews over the years, but most of them focus on the usual: how the band formed, the famous basement recordings, and Tom's career before he started Boston and got famous. Now, don't get me wrong, all of this is really fascinating and very interesting, but it's not really the information that I'm going for in order to make this video happen.
Most journalists aren't guitar geeks, so very few of them thought to ask Tom about his recording setup in detail. Occasionally, he would drop small hints, but the focus was rarely on the gear. I had to dig deeper, so I spent hours poring over interviews, articles, forums, and even obscure Boston videos like this one.
Sounds that he recorded with his guitars make it into the small box that you see here, which basically compression, a distortion part of a circuit, and EQing, which is very, very integral as to how to get that sound, along with the compression, but the EQing is the key. Emphasizing the right components of the guitar, harmonics, clipping them in a certain way and distorting them a certain way, and then at the output, filtering it so that it presents itself in a very big, nice, lush sound.
So what I was left with is fragments of information scattered over years in different interviews, and trying to consolidate everything into one place so that I had reliable information, but that wasn't a whole picture.
Early on in this challenge, I thought my mission was quite simple: crack the code of Boston's guitar tone. But as I dug deeper, what I uncovered turned out to be far more valuable than simply replicating the Boston sound. Here's the partial list of what has been confirmed by Tom Scholz that was used on the original recording. Tom uses two Gibson Gold Tops, the Collector's Choice number 10 from 1968. The first one has a P90 in the neck position and a DiMarzio Super Distortion in the bridge position, and the second one has a DiMarzio Super Distortion in both the neck and bridge position. The amp used on that recording was the Marshall Superlead 100-watt head, which came with the stock cabinet. No confirmation on which model that would be, but according to the research I've done, it's most likely a 1935 model with the G12M greenbacks. First in line after the Marshall Superlead, according to Tom, is a hi-fi system that he took apart, took the preamp, and boosted the front end of the Marshall. So I don't have any confirmation on which specific model that is, but he does confirm in the interview that any preamp would work for this purpose. It's also been confirmed that he used an MXR 6-band graphic EQ with these specific settings. He does mention that the pedal was noisy despite using a battery, but that's the model that he used to get that specific sound. Whether this has any impact on the tone, I don't know, but it is said that he used Fender bullet strings. They are 8 to 44. Up next, we have the Crybaby wah. He does confirm that it is used, but he doesn't seem to be using it in the way that everyone thought he was. So basically, the Crybaby is sometimes used to get that mid-hump kind of sound, but he does say that he prefers the MXR for that purpose, but later on states that he loves using the Crybaby wah to accentuate certain frequencies on the neck depending on where he is. So he's going to tilt the pedal towards either the bass end or the high end, depending on what lead part needs, just to get those frequencies to pop out of the mix. There's also the Sea Moon Fresh Fuzz, which is said to have been used both in the studio and live. His was modified to make it sound brighter. I think we can hear that on a specific song, which I'm going to showcase later in the video, and it does seem that he used it in a few places here and there throughout the whole first album. His microphone for the original recording was done with an Electro Voice RE16 dynamic microphone. When it comes to outboard gear in the studio, I don't have exact confirmation on make and model, but I do have a few pictures here of certain models. Maybe some of you know what it is, and you can let us know in the comments. It is said that he used Clark EQ, I'm not sure which model. And finally, he used an Eventide H910, which was used to get that doubling effect for a single guitar to turn into a stereo signal.
All right, so I want to make this clear up front. There's no way I can nail this tone 100%. I hope that's clear by the fact that, one, I don't have the same gear. I don't have access to unlimited funds so I can buy the same stuff. So we're going at it with a general understanding of what goes into the tone, and I'm trying to replicate it with things that I think are pretty close to what Tom Scholz was using for the recording. And second, I don't have his hands, I don't have his talents, his phrasing, and his mind, so you can't expect me to sound exactly like him. I don't have the same touch, I don't have the same approach. I hope this is logical, but some people are always quick to point that out in videos whenever you're trying to sound like someone. So yes, I don't have his hand, don't have his brain, or even a percentile of his talent. With that being said, let's get to the experiment.
So here's what we know for sure. Les Pauls were used, and both of these guitars were equipped with DiMarzio Super Distortion in the bridge position. The amp was a 1972 Marshall Super Lead with the stock cab. I don't know if there were any mods done to the Marshall Super Lead, and the stock cab, I presume, is the 1935, which may have come with either greenbacks or G1230s, but I'm pretty sure that greenbacks were used for this particular recording just based on how it sounds. A power soak was used to attenuate the signal. Now, the power soak would later be commercially available through Rockman, which was the company that Tom started, but at that specific time, Rockman wasn't still born yet, it wasn't still commercially available, so this was some far out technology for the time period, and he does mention that he used a power soak so he could get the amp cooking, but at a very moderate level in his studio. We know that the microphone is an Electro Voice RE16 dynamic microphone that was placed a few feet away from the amp, and there were no carpets on the floor, so he was picking up the reflections off the floor. He's also stated that he used a Crybaby wah. This would be a vintage one by today's standard, and 2 modified echoplexes. He's also stated that all the effects were running straight through into the amp, and last but certainly not the least is a hi-fi system, which hasn't been confirmed on which model it is, but he was using it as a preamp boost going into the Marshall so he could get more sustain and more gain from the amp. Okay, so here's what I have right now. The microphone is not exactly in the middle. I have it on an angle like this. What I'm hearing in the cans right now seems to sound a little smoother in the top end, but it's not the same microphone. It's not the same amp, not the same speakers. So I'll show you what I have going on right now. It's a pretty simple setup. There's nothing fancy here. So what I'm doing is I'm using the torpedo, but I'm only using it here, if we look in the back, over here. So basically, the torpedo is just being used as an attenuator. So I'm not using the digital portion of this, it's just basically attenuating it by 20 dB. If we look inside, hopefully we can see, those are the speakers. So clearly, not the same setup as at JCM
800 or the Super Lead or whatever old model. This is a more modern take on it. And what I'm doing right now, that was a microphone. What I'm doing right now is I'm going through the Flattley, which is the best sounding wah that I have. It doesn't create the hiss, it doesn't have all the top end. I'm going to the boost, and that one is adding just a bit of volume, no coloration. Then the Berkeley, right over here. The compressor, I'm not certain if I'm going to use it or not. Probably not. Then the EQ over here. Going to this guy. The delay I'm not using at the moment. And the Harmonist is only to add that kind of, like that chorusy effect. If I had two JCM 900, I would try a stereo setup. But since I don't, I'm keeping it mono, just keeping it simple. Right now, to be honest, this is not really sounding the way I want it. It's fine. I mean, it's fine. It sounds okay, but it's missing something. And I think it has to do with the microphone and the speaker choice. Of course, the amp is important, but I can't do anything about that. So the only thing I have left is the IRs. And let's go see what that sounds like. So here's what I've learned from this experiment. First off, the gear does matter to a certain extent, but knowing how to use it proved to be even more crucial. Now, this was really tough for me because I overthought everything. I was trying to put myself in the position of what would my studio look like if it was an all-analog studio. So I was trying to think of the constraint, the limitations of such a studio. Then I was thinking about how brilliant Tom Scholz is and what could he have done in post-production that would have been really tricky and might have fooled everybody. And I got lost, completely lost on this one. And I came inches from quitting the whole project. It's a passion affair for me. I'm really passionate about this. I really care about recording. I love Boston. It's part of the soundtrack of my youth, but this was really chewing me up because I was wasting a whole lot of time trying different things with the signal chain, trying to read into the interview, trying to go beyond what was written on paper and trying to think like an engineer. And seriously, I was burning myself out with this project and I came really close to quitting. But eventually, I just decided, to hell with it, I'm just going to use my ears and try stuff. And that's where I really unlocked the potential of trying to learn from someone else's engineering and someone else's guitar tone. This experiment has really brought forth a compelling question for me. Are we overthinking the gear? When it comes to guitar players, we go through pedals upon pedals, and we have to watch shows on YouTube or read articles about how to properly set the pedals, how to get proper gain staging and all this stuff. And we use so much gear, buy so much of it, sell so much of it. And here we have someone in his early 20s, back in the 70s, when there wasn't as much choice available in terms of gear, creating some very unique tones just based on engineering principles. Just the understanding of EQ, the understanding of how to set the gain. And here I am with about 150 guitar pedals, and I can't find my own sound. And I'm sure I'm not the only guy struggling with this. I'm sure you watching probably have been there, or maybe you're still there right now. So this brings forth the question: are modern guitar players overthinking the gear without actually understanding how to use it properly to begin with? Should we go back to the drawing board? Should there be more education done on what a fuzz is, how to use it, how to stack different pedals together based on the tone that you have in your head, a clear understanding of the frequencies you're looking for? So, what do you think? Do you think that perhaps we overthink stuff? You hear so many people say, oh, I just use a guitar plugged straight into the amp and that's my sound. And for someone like me, I have a hard time with that. I'm like, yeah, I'm not quite there. I have a sound in my head. I just don't know how to achieve it. So are we overthinking it? What does that mean for modern guitar players? Let me know in the comment section. I read all the questions and comments in my videos. And if you have a question, it'll be a pleasure for me to answer. And in the meantime, I'm about to go and torture myself once again. I'm really wondering about Brian May. I just talked about him. His rig seems to be pretty basic, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to get to learn something very valuable. I'm going to make a fool out of myself once again. So if you're into that, you like to see a middle-aged man torture himself trying to replicate other people's tones, I invite you to click on the video that's appearing on screen right now, and I'm going to see you over there. Cheers.